rdwolff.info or rdwolff with 2fs.com. Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Great having you with us. We have the Prime Minister of New Zealand talking about capitalism failing. We have these, and concern about that. But more importantly, we've got this whole tax cut thing coming down out of the Republicans, and it doesn't seem to have a lot of demand from the American people, but B, it does from the donor class, and therefore probably something will happen. What is, when our democracy is controlled and defined by the major players in our economy, first of all, what is that called? And secondly, would you agree with my characterization that that is what's happening?
Yes, I would agree with it 100%. If I could go over 100%, I'd come up with that. It is unbelievable for me to watch it. There's a headline in today's paper that the Koch brothers are contributing big bucks to defeat a senator in Wisconsin, a Democrat, because that senator seems to stand in the way of the tax cuts that the Koch brothers will benefit from 10 different ways. I mean, that's as naked as you could possibly be. Koch brothers are among the 10 or 20 richest people in the United States and are free in our system to use that money to get the taxes adjusted so they can become even richer than they already are, since they seem driven in a kind of Midas touch manner to this kind of behavior. And I think, if you allow me a moment, I think there is the key, in a sense. This is a system that is spinning out of control. It doesn't want to look at the social consequences of what it is doing, the pursuit of advantage, of wealth, of removing any government limits on the pursuit of wealth is just being pushed forward as an unquestionable desideratum of what everybody's doing in the economic system, and it is producing unspeakable social division and social suffering, and it doesn't take a genius or a doomsday person to say that this is not a sustainable arrangement, probably in any society over a long period of time, but especially not in the United States, which until recently liked to boast that capitalism was raising up the entire middle class. Everybody now knows that isn't true, but it doesn't seem to affect the onward rush of making more money no matter what the cost is.
Yeah, to take a cue from the title of your most recent book, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, to what extent is the lack of regulation a crisis for capitalism, and to what extent is that crisis of capitalism a crisis of democracy? It seems like this. Well, I'll just leave that question as it stands.
Well, I don't think it's a crisis of capitalism in this sense. Given the way the system works, given the idea that every producer of goods and services is supposed to drive ever forward to maximize profits under the crazy belief that if all the businesses are maximizing profits, in some magical way, this will all work out so we live in the best of all possible worlds for everybody. In this crazy idea, you have a capitalism doing its thing, and I think that can go on for a long amount of time. At least so long as the victims, the mass of people in trouble, don't stop it. Regulation has always come, always in American history, when the victims of how capitalism has been working become so numerous and so embittered that they will finally rise up and make it happen. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. Every one of the 50 states in this country has an insurance commission. Why? Because the insurance industry, left to its own devices, ripped everybody off for premiums that they couldn't tolerate, and the end result was a demand for commissions. Every state has a utility commission. Why? Because the gas and oil and the telephone and electric companies, usually having monopolies in a particular area, were able to rip everybody off. The antitrust operations of the United States government were pushed a century or more ago because big companies becoming monopolies were ripping everybody off. I mean, the message here is that regulation is the effort after the fact to limit, to constrain this kind of spinning out of control, because even if capitalism can keep going into greater and greater inequality, the larger society within which the capitalist system has to function may not be willing to go along, and therein lies really serious social conflict, social explosions, revolutions, and all of that. And what is so remarkable about the time we're living in is that you're having the rush forward of an unrestrained capitalism, busily deregulating what little regulations are left, and therefore waltzing itself into the exact same unsustainable, dangerous social conditions that we've seen in the past. But all of this happening as if there was no past, was no history, was no problem. We just go ahead and do all of this and let the rich make the laws they want. It's extraordinary to watch. And maybe the whole hope of the Democratic Party is that this thing blows itself up and that they will then cash in the chips when everyone gets disgusted with where this has taken.
Well, that's exactly what happened in the 20s.
That's a very dangerous way to do politics in a society working this way.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened in the 20s. We have just a minute left before we're going to hit a hard break here, Professor. I've always used the metaphor of football. You know, if you had a football game and the one team got to start at the 10-yard line and the other team got to start at the 40-yard line or something like that, or if the rules were different depending on who had the most money, or the referees have been corrupted. I mean, is that a reasonable analogy? Yes, and
I circulate here in New York City where I live and work among people who are in the 1%. And if you have a conversation with them, they will tell you that's what business in their line of work requires them to do. And they sometimes say it with a kind of wistful, wishing it weren't so, but that's the way this system works. And if they're not going to be eaten up by it, well, then they have to play the game. And the end result, they say, sometimes with real chagrin, is what we're living through.
So the deregulation is the consequence of the corruption, and then the deregulation leads to more corruption. We're in a downward spiral, right?
It's a self-reinforcing spiral. You make greater inequality. That allows the rich to have influence on the system so they can milk it for even more inequality, and it just feeds on itself.
But that's what happened in the 20s. Has this kind of a cycle ever been interrupted by anything other than a great crash?
Yeah, it's been interrupted by a revolution, by people getting so angry at the wrong end of this system, the short end of the stick.
Russia in 1916.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, Dr. Richard Wolff, economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author most recently of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown. Professor, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom. Look forward to talking with you again.
Me too. Great talking.